I still remember the exact moment my mother told me she was getting married. She didn't ease into it. She didn't sit me down gently or test my reaction first. She just stood in the middle of our tiny kitchen, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her phone clutched to her chest like it held the answer to every prayer she'd ever whispered, and said, "Tessa, I'm getting married." At first, I thought she was joking. Not because my mother wasn't beautiful, because she was. Not because she didn't deserve love, because she did. But because for most of my life, love had always come with late rent, empty promises, and men who talked big and disappeared fast. My mother didn't attract stability. She attracted storms. So when I looked at her and saw that smile trembling on her face, I asked the only question that mattered. To who? Her smile widened. Daniel Carter. The name meant nothing to me. At least not then. But 2 days later, when I typed it into my phone and watched article after article appear, my stomach dropped. Daniel Carter wasn't just rich. He was the kind of rich people wrote about. The kind of rich with glossy magazine profiles, charity galas, real estate holdings, investment firms, and pictures taken on yachts longer than the apartment building I grew up in. And my mother was marrying him. Just like that. 3 months after meeting him. I stared at my screen for a long time, rereading the same sentence over and over. Billionaire investor Daniel Carter seen attending annual pediatric foundation gala. I should have been happy for her. I wanted to be. But all I could think was that people like Daniel Carter didn't marry women like my mother unless there was a reason. And people like us didn't suddenly step into lives like that without paying for it somehow. When I brought it up, my mother got defensive immediately. "Why do you always assume the worst?" she asked. "Because the worst usually shows up. This is different. That's what scares me." She stared at me, hurt flashing across her face before she covered it with irritation. "Daniel is kind. He's thoughtful. He listens to me. He sees me." I wanted to tell her that men like Daniel Carter saw everything in terms of value. That they didn't build empires by being soft. That no one handed over that kind of power without wanting something in return. But she looked so happy standing there in our little kitchen, with peeling paint above the window and a broken cabinet door we'd been meaning to fix for months, that I swallowed the warning. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe this really was our miracle. Maybe after years of scraping by, my mother had finally found the one opportunity she used to talk about late at night when the lights were off and neither of us could sleep. "All it takes is one door," she would say. "One open door can change your whole life." I just didn't know that walking through this one would ruin almost everything first. The first time I saw the Carter estate, I understood immediately that this wasn't just a different life. It was another universe. The driveway curved through manicured grounds that looked too perfect to be real. The house rose behind the trees like something designed to make ordinary people feel small. Glass walls, stone columns, iron gates. The kind of place that didn't just whisper money, but screamed power. I remember sitting in the passenger seat while my mother adjusted the sleeves of her dress for the 3rd time and said, too brightly, "Try to keep an open mind tonight." I looked at her. "That depends. Is everyone in there as rich as he is?" She laughed nervously. "Tessa, I'm serious. It's just dinner." It was never going to be just dinner. The front doors opened before we even knocked, and a house manager, because apparently people that rich had house managers, welcomed us inside. The entry hall alone was bigger than any apartment I had ever lived in. Everything gleamed. Marble floors, grand staircase, soft lighting, art that probably cost more than my entire childhood. My mother was trying not to look overwhelmed, but I could feel it pouring off her. Then I saw him. He was standing near the fireplace in the formal living room, one hand in his pocket, posture easy in a way that only comes from belonging somewhere completely. Dark suit, sharp jaw, cool expression. He looked about my age, maybe a little older, and he didn't bother to hide the way his eyes moved over me and my mother in one swift, dismissive glance. Daniel stepped forward with that polished, easy warmth rich men seem to practice in mirrors. "You made it," he said, smiling at my mother before kissing her cheek. Then he turned to me. "Tessa, it's good to finally meet you." I forced a polite smile. "You too." But I wasn't looking at Daniel anymore. I was looking at his son, Ethan Carter. And if Daniel looked warm enough to invite people in, Ethan looked built to keep them out. Daniel gestured toward him. "You've met Ethan, I assume." Ethan's gaze stayed on me for one beat too long before he said, "Not officially." His voice was calm, flat, controlled. The kind of voice that made every word feel deliberate. My mother stepped closer to Daniel, slipping into the role of fiancé with a confidence that almost convinced me this was normal. "Ethan, it's lovely to finally meet you." He gave her a brief nod, polite but cold. Then his eyes moved back to me. "So this is the life upgrade," he said. The room went still. My mother blinked. Daniel's smile tightened by the slightest degree, and I felt heat rush to my face so fast it almost made me dizzy. I should have stayed quiet. Instead, I smiled back at him, just enough to make it clear I wasn't intimidated. "And you must be the welcoming committee." Something flashed in his eyes then. Not guilt. Not even annoyance. Interest. Dinner was a disaster disguised as luxury. Daniel did most of the talking, charming and attentive, asking me about work, about my plans, about whether I liked the city. My mother laughed more than usual, her voice brighter, higher, almost fragile around the edges. She was trying too hard to prove she fit there, and every second of it made me want to drag her back to our old apartment where at least no one made us feel like guests in our own lives. Ethan barely spoke unless directly addressed, but when he did, his words landed like tiny cuts. "So what do you do?" he asked me at one point, finally looking my way. "Digital marketing," I said. "Mostly freelance right now." "Freelance," he repeated. I could already hear the judgment in that one word. "I'm building something more stable," I added. He nodded slowly. "So nothing stable yet." My grip tightened around my fork. Daniel gave him a warning look. "Ethan." "What?" Ethan asked, completely calm. "I'm just trying to understand." No, he wasn't trying to understand. He was measuring me. And worse, he was measuring my mother. How much did we cost? How temporary were we? How quickly would we disappear? By the time dessert arrived, I already hated him. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Because hate was easier than admitting he got under my skin in a way I couldn't explain. After dinner, my mother and Daniel went to walk the garden, leaving me in the kitchen searching for a glass of water I didn't really need, just to avoid another second in that polished museum of a house. I heard him before I saw him. "You're checking the exits already?" I turned. Ethan leaned against the doorway, sleeves rolled up now, tie loosened just enough to make him look less formal and somehow more dangerous. "I'm getting water." "Right. What do you want?" His gaze didn't soften. "Honesty." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "From me. From both of us." I folded my arms. "Okay. You first." He pushed off the doorway and came a little closer. Not threateningly. Not casually either. Just close enough that I could see the exact shade of gray in his eyes. "My father moves fast when he wants something," he said. "Too fast. That usually ends badly." I stared at him. "So you think my mother is after his money?" "I think nobody marries into this family without wanting something. Maybe that says more about your family than it does about mine." That landed. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you're just used to people being beneath you." He studied me for a moment, and there was something unnerving about the silence that followed. He wasn't angry. He was recalculating. "I don't think you're beneath me," he said at last. No. I think you're more dangerous than your mother." It should have felt like an insult. Instead, for reasons I didn't understand, it felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to me all night. A month later, my mother moved into the Carter estate. 2 weeks after that, so did I. It was supposed to be temporary. My lease had ended, my freelance work was unstable, and my mother insisted it would only be until I figured out my next move. Daniel agreed immediately, too quickly for my comfort, and told me there was more than enough room. There was. That house had wings. Still, the first few nights I slept like someone trespassing. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me this wasn't mine. Every carefully chosen piece of furniture felt like it belonged to a world I could touch but never keep. My mother adapted faster than I expected. She liked the routines, the security, the way people opened doors for her and remembered how she took her tea. After years of surviving, she seemed almost intoxicated by being taken care of. That should have reassured me. Instead, it scared me, because I had never seen her this vulnerable to comfort before. And Ethan? At first, he kept his distance. We passed each other in hallways, shared stiff breakfasts, exchanged the occasional clipped remark. But even when he said nothing, I felt him noticing everything. Whether I came home late, whether my mother seemed nervous after dinner with Daniel, whether I was watching him watching us. Then one night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs to the kitchen around 1 in the morning. The house was silent in that eerie way huge places are silent, like the walls are listening. I found Ethan there, standing barefoot in a black t-shirt, pouring himself coffee. At 1 in the morning. He glanced at me. Insomnia. Something like that. He set the coffee pot down. You should get used to it. This house has a way of keeping people awake. I leaned against the counter. Do all your conversations sound like warnings? Only the important ones. I should have left. I knew that. But something about the quiet, the late hour, the way the sharp edges between us felt less rehearsed in the dark, made me stay. He looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You don't belong here." The words hit harder at 1 in the morning. Maybe because they sounded less cruel and more true. I swallowed. And you think you do? Just because you were born into it. His expression changed just slightly. I know what it costs. I almost laughed. Must be hard, all that money and power. He didn't smile. You think that protects people, doesn't it? No. It just makes the damage more expensive. For the first time since I met him, he sounded tired. Not arrogant. Not mocking. Tired. I hated how much that shifted something inside me. You really don't want us here, I said. That's not the problem. Then what is? He looked away first, toward the dark windows. The problem is that my father doesn't do anything without a reason. There it was again. That same line in a different form. I frowned. You keep saying that, because you keep not hearing it. I stepped closer before I could stop myself. Then say what you actually mean. His eyes locked on mine. For one strange second, the whole room seemed to still around us. Then he said quietly, "I mean, you should be careful." And somehow that was worse. Because I realized he wasn't trying to insult me anymore. He was trying to warn me. After that night, our hostility changed shape. It didn't disappear. It sharpened into something stranger. We argued constantly, but the arguments lasted longer. Became smarter. Less about class and pride, more about everything else. Politics. Loyalty. Family. Ambition. Fear. What people owe the people who save them. What people become when they're finally offered everything they've never had. I learned that Ethan ran part of his father's company but hated almost all of the social theater that came with it. That he remembered everything people said and rarely repeated himself. That he had a way of looking at me when I was speaking that made me feel like he could hear the sentence underneath the one I actually said. And slowly, against all common sense, I stopped seeing him as the enemy. I started noticing the way he loosened whenever my mother laughed genuinely. The way he watched Daniel when he thought no one else noticed. The way he always seemed half-braced for impact, even in his own house. One evening, after another long dinner with donors and executives and women who complimented my mother's dress with smiles that didn't reach their eyes, I slipped out onto the back terrace for air. A minute later, Ethan joined me. "Escaping. Breathing," I said. He stood beside me, not too close. "You're getting better at pretending." Is that a compliment? No. I looked at him. Then why does it sound like one? His mouth almost moved. Not quite a smile. You adapt fast. That's what people do when they've had no choice. He turned then, really looking at me, and whatever he saw must have unsettled him because his expression shifted. "I know," he said. 3 months after the wedding, I kissed him. Or maybe he kissed me. Even now, I'm not sure where the line actually broke. All I know is that it happened in the library during a storm. The power had flickered twice. My mother and Daniel were in the city for some private dinner. The house felt too empty, too dark, too full of every conversation we'd both been avoiding. I had gone into the library looking for a book just to calm down, and Ethan was already there, sleeves rolled, tie discarded, drink in hand, staring out at the rain. Neither of us left. We started talking the way we always did, carefully, defensively, circling the things that mattered. But that night there was an edge to it. A tension that had been building for weeks and had finally grown too heavy to ignore. He asked me if I was happy here. I said I didn't know. I asked him if he trusted his father. He said no so fast it made my breath catch. Then, before I could stop myself, I asked, "Do you trust me?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Not enough," he said. I should have laughed. I should have snapped back with something sharp and left. Instead, I stepped closer. "Then why do you keep looking at me like that?" His voice dropped. "Because I'm trying not to." The rain slammed harder against the windows. I don't know who moved first. I only remember the shock of it. His hand on my face, careful for someone who looked like he'd break things before he handled them gently. The way the kiss felt wrong and inevitable at the same time. The way I knew, even while it was happening, that this would complicate everything. Maybe ruin everything. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then I whispered, "This can't happen again." He gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "That's probably true." It happened again the next night. And the night after that. Not in reckless, obvious ways. We were too careful for that. Too aware of the disaster waiting on the other side of being caught. But stolen moments became a language of their own. A glance across the breakfast table. Fingers brushing in a hallway. Late-night conversations that shifted into whispers when footsteps passed. I kept telling myself it was temporary. That this was just the pressure of living in the same house, in the same secret, in the same dangerous orbit. But secrets don't get smaller when you feed them. They get teeth. The first crack came from my mother. She found me smiling at my phone one morning and tilted her head. "Someone's making you happy." I nearly dropped it. "No one." She smiled knowingly. "You're a terrible liar." He crept up my neck. "It's nothing." She let it go, but I noticed her watching me more after that. Not suspiciously. Curiously. Like she could sense the shift but hadn't figured out its shape yet. And that should have been enough to make me stop. It wasn't. Because around Ethan, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just attraction. Recognition. As if beneath the money, beneath the house, beneath the family name and the tension and the danger, he understood what it meant to live half-defensive, always waiting for the thing you care about to be used against you. That was the trap. Not the kisses. Not the secrecy. The feeling of being seen. Then I found the file. I wasn't looking for it. I was in Daniel's home office one afternoon searching for my mother, because she had left her phone downstairs and the house manager mentioned Daniel had asked for her. His office door was open. The room was empty. On the desk was a folder with my mother's name typed neatly across the tab. I should have walked away. Instead, I opened it. Inside were pages of documents I barely understood at first. Trust agreements. Prenuptial amendments. Real estate transfer notes. Legal memos. And clipped to the top was a handwritten note in Daniel's precise script. Finalize after 6-month review. Ensure compliance before beneficiary adjustment. I felt cold all over. 6-month review? Beneficiary adjustment? My mother's name appeared again and again, alongside terms like contingent spouse provision and family image stabilization strategy. Image. Strategy. I flipped through more pages, my heart pounding harder with every line. There it was. Clear enough even for me to understand. Daniel's marriage to my mother wasn't just personal. It was financial. Reputational. Structured. There had been fallout in his company over a prior scandal, something about executive misconduct, insider payments, a settlement quietly buried in the press. His legal team had apparently recommended a stabilizing domestic realignment to improve public trust before a major merger. My mother wasn't just his wife. She was part of a recovery plan. I heard footsteps outside and shoved the papers back just as the door opened. Ethan stepped in and stopped the second he saw my face. What happened? I shut the folder too fast. You tell me. His eyes moved to the desk. Then his expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. And that was worse. You knew. Tessa. You knew, I repeated louder this time. He closed the door behind him. Not all of it. How much? His silence answered for him. I felt sick. All those warnings, I said. All that talk about being careful. You knew my mother was being used, and you said nothing. His jaw tightened. I was trying to find proof. You had proof. It was sitting in his office. It's not enough. For what? For you to grow a conscience. That's not fair. I laughed, sharp and furious. No, you let me stand here every day. Let my mother plan her future. Let her fall in love with this life while you stood by knowing she was a corporate cleanup strategy. His voice turned hard. And what do you think would happen if I accused him without something stronger? He'd bury it. He'd move the assets. He'd make her look unstable. He's done it before. The room spun for a second. He's done it before? Ethan looked like he regretted saying it. I stepped toward him. What does that mean? He exhaled slowly. My father had another relationship years ago. Public enough to matter. Quiet enough to control. When it ended, she signed an NDA and disappeared with a settlement. My stomach dropped. And you think he'll do that to my mother? I think he'll do worse if he feels threatened. That was the moment everything changed. Not when I fell in love with Ethan. Not even when I found the file. It was then. When I understood that this house wasn't divided between rich people and outsiders. It was divided between people who believed Daniel Carter and people who survived him. I pulled away from Ethan for 3 days after that. Not because I stopped feeling anything. Because I felt too much. Anger. Shame. Fear. Guilt. My mother was radiant during those days, planning charity appearances and talking about redesigning a guest suite and laughing over lunch with women who would never have looked at her twice 6 months earlier. Watching her made my chest ache. She looked secure, safe, proud, like she had finally outrun every bad year that came before. How was I supposed to destroy that? And how was I supposed not to? On the 4th night, Ethan came to my room. He didn't touch me, didn't step inside when I opened the door. He just stood there in the hallway looking more worn down than I'd ever seen him. I have something, he said. I crossed my arms. What? Proof. I stared at him. He held up a small flash drive. Not enough to take him down completely, he said, but enough to show your mother this marriage isn't what she thinks it is. I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat at my desk with the curtains closed and my laptop brightness turned low. Ethan plugged in the drive and opened a folder full of emails, internal memos, and financial summaries. Some were between Daniel and his legal team. Others were between executives discussing shareholder sentiment, media recovery, and domestic optics. I felt my throat close as I read one line after another. Carter's engagement has tested positively with target demographics. Spouse profile improves relatability metrics. Daughter's integration remains a variable. Monitor. Variable. I was a variable. My mother was a profile. A person reduced to a strategy. Then Ethan opened a voice recording. Daniel's voice filled the room, smooth and faintly amused. No, she's grateful. That's the easiest kind. Women who've struggled confuse comfort with love. Just make sure the paperwork locks before year-end. I stopped breathing. The room went silent when it ended. Ethan looked at me, waiting for me to say something. Instead, I closed the laptop. We tell her tomorrow. He nodded. But tomorrow never came. Because the next morning, my mother was gone. At first, no one panicked. Daniel said she had gone to the spa. Then he said she had decided to stay overnight in the city. Then he started making calls. By evening, the house was tight with tension. Her phone had been turned off since noon. Her assistant didn't know where she was. The driver Daniel claimed had dropped her off at the hotel had no record of the trip. I found Ethan in the garage speaking urgently into his phone. When he saw me, he ended the call. What's happening? His expression said enough before he spoke. I think she saw something. My chest tightened. What? I don't know. But she left in a rush and my father's too calm. Too calm. That was what terrified me. Not shouting. Not fear. Control. We found her just after midnight in one of the estate's smaller guest properties, a lake house about 20 minutes away that Daniel rarely used. Ethan had guessed she might go somewhere private if she was overwhelmed. She opened the door with red-rimmed eyes and looked at us like she'd been expecting one of us, but not both. "Tessa," she whispered. I rushed to her. "Mom, what happened?" She looked past me at Ethan, then back at me. "I found the messages," she said. "Not Daniel's legal files. Not the voice recording. Messages." She stepped aside and let us in. On the kitchen table lay her phone, Daniel's tablet, and a printed set of screenshots. I picked one up. My blood went cold. Daniel wasn't having an affair in the romantic sense. It was worse. He had been exchanging messages with board members and advisors about my mother in real time. Her clothes. Her behavior. Which interviews she should do. Which parts of her background should be emphasized. Which details should be softened. Which old debts should be quietly cleared to preserve the redemption arc. She wasn't his wife. She was his project. My mother gave a small, broken laugh. "Do you know what one of them called me?" I couldn't speak. She answered her own question. "Marketable." The word hung there like smoke. Then she looked at Ethan. "And you knew." It wasn't a question. He didn't deny it. I knew enough to worry. Her face hardened. "But not enough to tell me. I was trying to protect you." "No," she said. "You were trying to manage the fallout." He looked like she'd slapped him. And maybe she had, in the only way that mattered. That should have been the end of us, me and Ethan. Maybe it should have been. But crises reveal people faster than comfort ever does. Over the next week, Daniel shifted from concerned husband to controlled strategist. He sent flowers, apology letters, voice messages, legal reassurances. He framed everything as a misunderstanding caused by corporate language, insisted his feelings for my mother were real, and claimed the advisors had simply been trying to protect them both from public scrutiny. My mother almost believed him once. Almost. Until Ethan found the final piece. A revised estate document prepared but not yet executed. One that would have left my mother with a limited payout after 12 months of marriage and almost nothing if destabilizing conduct could be proven before then. Destabilizing conduct. I knew immediately what that meant. If they could make her look emotional, reckless, disloyal, unstable, anything that could be shaped into a breach, Daniel could discard her with minimal damage. And then I saw the clause that made my heart stop. Daughter associated, reputational liability. Me. If I created scandal, it could affect her settlement. Maybe that was why Daniel had tolerated me in the house. Maybe that was why he watched me so carefully. Maybe that was why Ethan had always felt so dangerous. Because if anyone ever discovered what was happening between us, Daniel could use it to destroy my mother financially. When I told Ethan, his face went still in a way I had learned to fear. "He knows," he said. I stared at him. "What?" "He must." "How?" "He notices everything. If that clause is in there, he's been building an exit strategy around you." For a second, neither of us moved. Then the truth hit all at once. He didn't just know my mother was useful. He knew I was leverage. The next part happened fast. Too fast. Daniel invited my mother to a private reconciliation dinner at the main house and asked me to be there too. He said it was time for honesty. For family. For healing. I knew it was a trap the moment I heard the word family. But my mother wanted closure, and Ethan insisted we couldn't keep running. So we went. Dinner was served in the smaller formal dining room, the intimate one Daniel used when he wanted conversations to feel sincere. Candles. Soft music. No staff in sight except one woman pouring wine and vanishing again. Daniel looked composed. Concerned. Almost wounded. "I hate that it's come to this," he said gently. My mother sat rigid across from him. "Then don't insult me by pretending you didn't build it this way." He sighed. "I made mistakes." "Mistakes," I said. "You turned her into a branding exercise." His gaze shifted to me, and for the first time there was no warmth in it. "Adults are speaking, Tessa." My mother flinched. Ethan, seated beside me, went cold. "Watch it." Daniel's eyes moved to him now. "Interesting." The word made the room tighten. My pulse started pounding. Daniel set his napkin down carefully. I wondered when that particular complication would force itself into the open. My mother looked between us. "What is he talking about?" No one answered fast enough. Then Daniel smiled. Not kindly. Oh, he said. You don't know. My mother turned to me. Tessa, I couldn't breathe. Daniel leaned back in his chair, perfectly calm, and said, Your daughter and my son have been sleeping together. The silence that followed felt like something breaking underwater. My mother stared at me like she didn't recognize my face. No, she whispered. Mom. She pushed back from the table so hard her chair nearly tipped. Tell me he's lying. I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. And that hesitation was enough. My mother's face crumpled in disbelief. You knew this whole time? She asked Ethan. I was going to tell you. When? That's enough, Daniel said smoothly. As painful as this is, perhaps it helps clarify why recent tensions have escalated. Emotional entanglements distort judgment. I wanted to launch the table at him. Instead, I stood. You planned this. He didn't even blink. I prepared for possibilities. My mother stepped back from all of us, shaking. You used me, she said to Daniel. Then she looked at me, voice breaking. And you lied to me. I moved toward her. Mom, please. Don't. That one word hit harder than anything Daniel had done. She left the room. I went after her, but Ethan caught my arm. Let her go for a second. I yanked free. This is your fault too. Something dark crossed his face. I know. My mother didn't speak to me for 2 days. She spoke to her lawyer, though. And to a forensic accountant Ethan quietly connected us with. And to a journalist whose name I only learned later. Because here's the thing about humiliation. Sometimes it breaks people. And sometimes it makes them dangerous. When she finally came to my room, she looked older somehow. Sharper too. I still can't look at you without feeling angry, she said. I swallowed. I know. But Daniel made one mistake. I looked up. He assumed I would choose dignity over survival. A chill went through me. My mother sat on the edge of the chair across from me, hands clasped tight. I spent too many years being dismissed by men with money, she said. Too many years being underestimated by people who thought kindness meant weakness. If he wants a strategy, I'll give him one. That was the night we made the plan. We didn't try to ruin Daniel emotionally. Men like him survive that. We went after the one thing he valued more than image. Control. The journalist already had old leads about Daniel's past settlements and internal misconduct concerns. Ethan's documents gave her the connective tissue. The forensic accountant found irregular transfers tied to shell entities used during the earlier scandal. My mother still had access to Daniel's calendar, his social circle, and most importantly, his assumptions. He thought she was wounded, ashamed, retreating. He had no idea she was inviting him to his own collapse. 2 weeks later, Daniel hosted a foundation gala at the estate, a high-profile event. Investors, reporters, board members, socialites, cameras. Exactly the kind of room he used to control narratives. My mother told him she wanted to reconcile publicly, to stand by his side, to show unity after private difficulties. He agreed. Of course he did. That night, she looked stunning in silver. Calm, elegant, untouchable. The kind of woman no one would ever again confuse for grateful. I stood hidden near the side corridor with Ethan, my hands shaking so badly I had to lace them together. You don't have to stay, he murmured. Yes, I do. He looked at me. Whatever happens after tonight. I cut him off softly. I know. Because I did. Whatever existed between us had already cost too much to survive unchanged. Out in the ballroom, Daniel was making remarks about philanthropy and resilience and the responsibility of privilege. Cameras flashed. Guests nodded. My mother stood beside him, serene as a blade. Then, when he finished, she stepped forward and reached for the microphone. At first, everyone smiled, expecting a charming wife's add-on. Instead, she said, "Before this evening continues, I'd like to thank my husband for teaching me something very valuable." The room quieted. Daniel's smile held, but only just. My mother continued, her voice clear and steady. He taught me that in certain circles, a woman's pain can be turned into a story. Her background can be polished. Her struggle can be packaged. Her love can be measured against shareholder confidence. A ripple moved through the crowd. Daniel's hand twitched at his side. My mother lifted a small remote from the podium. And then the screens behind them changed. Not to the foundation video everyone expected. To emails, legal memos, financial charts, screenshots of messages calling her marketable. Then the audio recording played. Daniel's own voice filling the room. She's grateful. That's the easiest kind. Gasps broke across the ballroom. Someone dropped a glass. And for the first time since I met him, Daniel Carter looked shocked. Really shocked. He stepped toward the podium. Turn that off. My mother looked at him, almost pitying. No. Journalists were already pulling out phones. Board members were whispering furiously. Investors looked like they wanted to disappear through the floor. Daniel hissed. Do you have any idea what you're doing? She held his gaze. For the first time? Yes. Security moved uncertainly at the room's edges, not sure whose orders mattered now. Ethan stepped out from the corridor into full view, and every head turned. Daniel's expression hardened into something ugly. You, he said. Ethan didn't flinch. You built this. Then the journalist released the story online. Right then. Time to the minute. Phones started buzzing across the ballroom in waves. Guests checking screens, reading headlines, seeing not just one embarrassing leak, but a full investigation linking Daniel's personal reputation management to buried corporate misconduct and financial irregularities. Control vanished in real time. That was the moment Daniel lost. Not because of scandal alone, but because everyone around him suddenly saw what he really was. A man who treated people like assets until the assets fought back. The fallout was brutal. Board investigations, asset freezes, emergency resignations, old settlements reopened under public pressure, charity partners distancing themselves, commentators tearing apart his manufactured image. His merger collapsed within days. And my mother? She left with enough evidence, leverage, and legal support to negotiate far more than Daniel ever intended to give her. Not because she wanted revenge money. Because she wanted freedom money. Safety money. Never again money. People always imagine justice feels triumphant. Sometimes it just feels quiet. A month after the gala, we moved into a smaller house by the water. Not a mansion. Not even close. But it had sunlight in the kitchen and creaky stairs and a back porch where my mother drank coffee in the mornings like she was relearning how to breathe. We didn't talk about Ethan at first. There was too much wreckage. Too much shame wrapped up in everything that had happened. When his name did come up, it was because my mother saw me looking out the window at nothing and asked, very calmly, "Do you love him?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Yes." She nodded slowly, like she had already known. "I don't know if I can forgive the lie," she said. "But I know what Daniel manipulated. And I know who your anger should belong to." I looked at her. "Are you saying it's okay?" "No," she said honestly. "I'm saying life is rarely clean after people like him touch it." That was the closest thing to permission I was ever going to get. Ethan came by one rainy afternoon in late autumn. Not dramatic. Not unexpected. Just a knock on the door. When I opened it, he looked different. Less polished. Less guarded. Like the collapse had stripped something unnecessary from him too. "I heard your mother might throw something at me if I came uninvited," he said. Despite everything, I almost smiled. She said that. She said she'd consider it. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. For a moment, we just looked at each other. No grand speeches. No music. Only the kind of silence two people earn after surviving the same fire from opposite sides. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "Yes." "I should have told her sooner." "Yes." He nodded once. "I know." Rain tapped softly against the porch roof. "I loved you before I had any right to," he said quietly. "And I kept thinking if I waited until the danger passed, I could tell the truth without losing you. But waiting was its own kind of betrayal." I looked down for a second, then back at him. "You don't get to make it sound noble." "I know." There was that phrase again. Not defensive this time. Just honest. I exhaled. "I still don't know what this is," I said. "Or what we'd even call it after everything." "Then don't call it anything yet." I studied his face, the tired sincerity in it, and understood something I wish I had known earlier. Love doesn't always arrive in good conditions. Sometimes it shows up in damaged places, between damaged people, and asks whether the truth can survive what secrecy did to it. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes, if the damage belongs to something darker than the love itself, the answer is maybe. And maybe was enough for me that day. So I stepped aside. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the story suddenly turned soft and simple. But because for the first time, no one was pretending anymore. My mother says now that the richest thing we got from Daniel Carter wasn't money. It was clarity. We learned exactly what people become when they think power protects them from consequences. We learned what comfort can hide, what image can buy, what silence can cost. And me? I learned that the most dangerous stories aren't the ones that begin with betrayal. They're the ones that begin with rescue. Because sometimes the hand pulling you into a beautiful life is the same hand closing the trap. And sometimes the only way out is to burn down the lie in front of everyone. Even the people you love. Especially them. So yes, my mother married a millionaire. And yes, I fell in love with his son. But that wasn't the real story. The real story was what happened when we all finally stopped pretending we were a family and started telling the truth about the man who never saw any of us as people at all. That was the night he lost everything. And oddly enough, it was the night we got our lives back.